Welcome to a new year. There's something about a fresh start that inspires us. A clean slate stretches ahead full of opportunity and hope. For many of us, this is a season for reflection. We set goals or make resolutions as a new year begins. Statistics reveal that more than 93% of those who make resolutions are focused on improving their health. Here at Dayspring, we believe that nothing is more important than your spiritual health. And we are committed to helping all who are a part of our Dayspring community to growing in their relationship with Jesus. If you are a regular Dayspringer, welcome home. If you are new to Dayspring, the people watching with you want you to feel like you've come home as well. Wherever you are and whenever you watch, we are glad to be worshiping with you. We live in challenging times, and a fresh start on the calendar isn't going to magically make anything better. But no matter what the months ahead may hold, we are committed to helping you discover what it looks like to follow Christ in this day and age. If you have any questions or want to learn more about us as a church, please explore our website at dayspringfellowship.com. I'm Chris Voigt, lead pastor at Dayspring. I'd love to connect with you if you have any questions about today's message or about the next steps in your spiritual journey. If you want more information about Dayspring and getting connected into our community, I'd be glad to help you do that as well. For today's service, you can find study questions and notes in the resources section of our website. And now, let's join our service already in progress.
You know, I knew all of the regular bad words. Even though I never used them, the Voigt family used them freely in their normal conversations and loudly when they were ticked off or frustrated. I didn't know there were other bad words. In spite of the negative junk I experienced growing up, I led a pretty sheltered life. My friends were mostly Christian. I read more than I watched TV because there were only 4 channels if you don't count PBS. We only went to kid-friendly movies. I mean, one time my mom let us go see Coal Miner's Daughter with her and Dad. It's the story of country singing great Loretta Lynn. Having already seen it, Mom warned us kids that at a certain scene, she would nudge us to go get popcorn in the lobby. It was Loretta's wedding night, if you get my drift. By today's standards, the scene was about as pure as ivory soap. But we came back with popcorn, never knowing what we missed. We still give her a hard time about that one. Mom, I know you're watching. Sorry, I should have warned you I was throwing you under the bus this morning, but I did sing a hymn, so get over it. So, even though I knew all the regular bad words, life was pretty darn clean, which explains the lack of education when it comes to the other bad words. Imagine my surprise when I heard some kids at school use a word that was clearly a bad word, but it was new to me. And my face showed it, and they noticed and laughed after confirming my ignorance. Later in the day, as we all waited for math class to start, Tim, that's what we'll call him, Tim gave me a definition of the word describing boy parts. I had no reason to doubt him. I was new to the school, so I didn't have any history to understand the social dynamics. There was no internet yet, so I couldn't Google it. I didn't own a dictionary that would have that definition, and I'm not sure that I would have looked it up even if I had. I was a good boy. Good boys don't look up those kind of words in the dictionaries. And honestly, I didn't care. I didn't know it at the time, but Tim gave me the opposite definition. The next day before school, Rain kept all of the students in the gym, waiting for that first bell to ring. And across the gym from me was a large group of guys, none of whom were in my friend's circle. And from across the room I hear, "Hey, Voigt, do you know what that word is?" Only they used the actual word. Of course I did. Tim had told me yesterday, so I said yes. "Do you have one?" Yes. Laughter, laughter, laughter. And it dawned on me pretty quickly what had happened as humiliation flooded my face and broke my spirit. Tim became my nemesis that day. It would have been great if I'd never had to see him again, but it was a small town with a small school, and we were both pretty smart academically, which meant that we had most of the same classes for the rest of 8th grade and all through high school. Every day, not only a reminder of that moment, but there were more, never as bad as that first one, but painful nonetheless. I hated him. He probably doesn't even remember the incident. And he certainly doesn't have any idea the damage it did, that moment did to me emotionally for a very long time. Unless he's watching right now and putting two together. That'd be just my luck. The first time I've ever told the story publicly, and he's watching. I hated him. Now, I'm guessing you have a Tim in your life. There is someone in your past who hurt you in the deepest places of your heart. Might be worse than mine, maybe not. Comparing pain is like comparing apples and oranges. We are all different people, and different things do damage in different ways. But in spite of that, you have a Tim. And if you don't, you still have someone in your life who isn't your favorite person to be around. In fact, if we want to get all spiritual, and we do, because this is church and everything we do is spiritual, you have someone in your life who pushes you to the limits of your ability to love them like Jesus. You may not hate them, but they drive you batty. They frustrate you to your breaking point. At work, they make your work harder. In fact, by the time you get home at the end of the day, their impact on you might make you a little harder to love like Jesus until you decompress. Hopefully it isn't, but it might be your spouse, one of your kids, your in-laws, your dad or mom. Maybe it's even someone at church, someone whose voice is like fingernails on a chalkboard to your ear. I mean, hopefully not me, but you never know. Or maybe they are so self-righteous and hypocritical that you can't stand to be anywhere near them. All they do is gossip and tear other people down, and you don't want any part of that. Now, have you got that person in your mind yet? You might have lots to choose from. Just pick one this morning. You don't have to tell anyone else, so you're safe. Have you got it? Now, keep that person at the edge of your thoughts as we look at Principle 6 today, growing into an emotionally mature adult. If you're just joining us this morning, either here in the room or online, this might seem like a weird way for Christians to start a service. Just hang on for a few more minutes. We're in the bottom of the 9th of learning how to integrate our emotional health into our spiritual journey. We started January with a bang. Literally. We had confetti cannons and everything. But they were for something else. Did I mention we're debt-free? Yeah. But the bang I'm really talking about is the truth we learned that all of us have at least a smidgen of emotional unhealth in our lives. In fact, some of us have a steamer trunk of baggage, of emotional baggage that keeps getting in the way because we have to tote that junk around with us everywhere we go. So instead of the hope of a new year, we faced the reality of our brokenness and then began to take steps to downsize our emotional baggage into a fanny pack. Even though the sermon series will end next week, our growth groups and Bible study groups have just begun a deeper dive into the 7 principles we've been exploring these past few Sundays. This is incredibly important in our spiritual journeys. As we've discovered, it's impossible to be spiritually mature while remaining emotionally unhealthy, emotionally immature. Our emotional unhealth trips us up and keeps us from becoming wholly healthy, emotional, and spiritual adults. And here at Dayspring, there is nothing more important than growing deeper spiritually, so we're tackling everything that gets in the way. Nothing will stop us from becoming emotionally healthy adults so that we can become spiritually healthy adults. Now, let me quickly paint a picture of some of the characteristics of an emotionally healthy adult. Sadly, there aren't many examples in our culture that model these characteristics, though many people mask these characteristics in their lives and give us a corrupted version. It looks good on the outside, but not so much on the inside. When you get to this chapter in your growth group or Bible study, you'll find that Peter Scazzero unpacks the characteristics of an emotional infant, of emotional infants, children, and adolescents as well. That might help give you a better picture of where you are on your journey. Remember that this has little to do with your actual age. You can be a physical adult and an emotional infant, child, or adolescent. As a side note, if you go to emotionallyhealthy.org, you'll find a free assessment that also might help you figure out your emotional maturity. For today, here are some of the characteristics of the target. This is what we know. Emotional adults, and by that I mean emotionally healthy adults, not adults who are simply emotional. Emotional adults are able to ask for what they want, need, or prefer clearly, directly, and honestly. There's no passive-aggressive behavior, no need to read their minds because they communicate clearly their hopes and expectations. Emotional adults recognize, manage, and take responsibility for their own thoughts and feelings. For example, if they are angry, they recognize that they are angry and why, and work through it before projecting it onto others and damaging relationships. Emotional adults can, when under stress, state their own beliefs and values without becoming adversarial. There's no, I know you are, but what am I? They aren't threatened by someone else's opinion, beliefs, or values. In fact, not only are emotional adults not threatened, but they respect other people's beliefs, values, and opinions without having to change them. They know how to agree to disagree without it getting in the way of relationship. They don't have to be right. If you're listening to this podcast later, I'm using air quotes here. Emotional adults give people room to make mistakes and not be perfect. Have you ever been around someone who has to point out all your mistakes and flaws? You didn't do this. You forgot to do that. Yeah, that's not an emotional adult you're dealing with. Emotional adults know how to appreciate people for who they are, the good, the bad, and the ugly, not for what they give back. It's a holistic view of people, not a transactional view. People are not commodities. Emotional adults are able to accurately assess their own limits, strengths, and weaknesses, and are able to freely discuss them with others. You might describe them as what you see is what you get kind of people. They don't try to hide themselves from others. And there is a humility and authenticity that comes with an accurate understanding of themselves, though it isn't always interpreted that way by emotional infants, children, and adolescents. Next up, emotional adults are deeply in tune with their own emotional world, which gives them the ability to enter into the feelings, needs, and concerns of others without losing themselves. And last, on Peter's list, some of the characteristics of emotional adults is that they have the capacity to resolve conflict maturely and negotiate solutions that consider perspectives of others. They know how to navigate and don't avoid difficult conversations. And when they have those conversations, they have them in life-giving ways. I once fired someone who thanked me afterward and stayed my friend because she felt like the conversation breathed life into her, even though it was incredibly challenging. Now, I think this is a good start. However, I want to point out that all of these are symptoms, so to speak, of emotional adults. There is a deeper motivation that feeds every one of these symptoms. Think about it for a moment. See if you can get there on their own. What is that motivation? Let's boil it down to one word: love. How we love is the pinnacle of spiritual maturity, and these symptoms describe emotionally healthy expressions of love. If you have your Bible, either physically or electronically, let's turn to a passage that is familiar to most of us. Turn or navigate to the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 22. This particular day in Jesus' ministry seemed to be a Q&A day. He was astounding the crowds with his teaching as he answered questions from the religious elite who were trying to trip him up. They were looking for any evidence they could use to discredit him. Let's pick it up in verse 34. Many of us have these memorized. Probably all of us should. This is our mandate from Jesus. This is the bar, and it's pretty high. Starts like this. But when the Pharisees, that's one of the groups of religious elites, when the Pharisees heard that he had silenced the Sadducees, that's another group of religious elites, and about the only thing the Pharisees and the Sadducees agreed on was that Jesus had to go. So after he'd silenced the Sadducees with his reply, they met together to question him again. One of them, an expert in religious law, tried to trap him with this question. So they're pulling out all the stops. They're parading in the experts who are, experts at religious nuance. And this expert says, "Teacher, which is the most important commandment in the law of Moses?" Now, to be fair, this was a great question. Remember that there were 615 laws in the Old Testament that the Jews were required to follow. It was a common practice to debate which ones trumped the other ones. Like, you couldn't work on Sabbath, but if your neighbor's cow fell in a ditch on the Sabbath, was it a sin to help it and your neighbor out? That kind of thing. The tricky part of this question was that even among the religious elites, none of them agreed on which commandments were the most important. Each rabbi had their own list called a yoke, and no matter how Jesus answered, someone was going to be unhappy with his answer. In verse 37, Jesus replied, "You must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind." This is the first and greatest commandment. A second is equally important: love your neighbor as yourself. The entire law and all the demands of the prophets are based on these two commandments. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbor. Now, in order for us to do this well, to follow the law of love, as we call it, we must experience deep connection with God, with ourselves, and with other people. As John talked about 2 weeks ago, God invites us to experience deep connection with him through the practice of his presence in our daily lives, the daily office, the practice of his presence. At the same time, he invites us to practice the presence of people with an awareness of his presence in our daily relationships. The two are too rarely brought together. Jesus modeled what it looks like for us. Over and over throughout the four Gospels, we are told that Jesus withdrew to pray with his Father. And what that contemplative time did in Jesus then overflowed through Jesus in a contemplative presence with people. Author Jean Vanier wrote that love is to reveal the beauty of another person to themselves. Jesus did that with each person he met. He listened. He paid attention. He had compassion. He was prayerfully present, revealing the beauty in others. The religious elites, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, they never put this together. They spent their time arguing about what was the most important and then built their lives around that. They were diligent and zealous and in their commitment to having God as the Lord of their lives. They memorized whole books of the Old Testament: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. If you're reading the Bible with me right now every day, we're in Leviticus. And can you imagine memorizing Leviticus or Numbers? Just lists of names and numbers? They memorized all of those. They prayed faithfully 5 times a day, tithed off of their income and gave money to the poor. But they missed the link. They viewed the most important as an either-or option, not a both-and option. So they weren't diligent, zealous, and committed to working on loving other people. That's one of the things they criticized Jesus for doing, because in their minds, he was doing it at the expense of his love and devotion to God, not in addition to it. Jesus delighted in people too much to be as devoted to God as they were. But Jesus refused to separate the practice of the presence of God from the practice of the presence of people. In order to be emotionally healthy, spiritually mature adults, we must combine the practice of the presence of God with the practice of the presence of people, just like Jesus. But we have a problem. I can't help but experience my world, my life without me at the center of the universe. You can't help but experience life with you at the center of the universe. I see through my eyes. I hear through my own ears. I feel what I feel, want what I want, experience what I experience. And we naturally want people to give up themselves as the center of their universe so they can experience the world the same way we experience ours, with us at the center of both worlds. We want the people closest to us to think, feel, and act the same way we do. We embrace an illusion of sameness when in fact we are very different. We even approach our relationship with God this way. There have been scientific studies of the brain that show we like some characteristic about another person, like, say, the fact that they are organized, because we see ourselves as organized, so we value that. And when we dislike some characteristic about someone, it's because we don't like that characteristic in ourselves. Like, talk about narcissistic. It's all about me. In order to become emotionally mature, we have to reorient the way we see ourselves in relation to others. We have to seek to discover and embrace this otherness in others. Jewish theologian Martin Barber described it this way: in the most healthy relationships, I recognize that I am made in the image of God, and so is every other person on the face of the earth. He calls it an I-thou relationship. I am I, and you are thou. In this reality, every person deserves respect. Every person deserves to be treated with dignity. I do not dehumanize or objectify them. I affirm their uniqueness and separate existence apart from me. Though you are different from me, as a you or a thou, I will respect and value you. However, in most of our human relationships, we lose sight of others as separate from us, and instead of treating them as thous, we treat them as its. In an I-it relationship, we treat people as objects, as a means to an end. For example, The person in front of you at line in the grocery store, the one with that product that needs a price check that takes forever, is simply in the way of you getting out of the store as fast as you can. The driver who cuts you off is an idiot. The neighbor mowing their lawn when you are sleeping is insensitive. You help others with something, their chores or a project, so they'll see you as the hero and feel obligated to return the favor. Have you ever received a gift knowing there was an emotional obligation to return the favor? That's an I-it relationship. The way I see things is right. And if you don't do things the right way, which is of course my way, then you are wrong. I once served under a worship pastor who was let go from his job. As they were cleaning out his office, they found one of his goal worksheets from a leadership conference. It said, "Manipulate those in my ministry to accomplish my goals." That is an I-it relationship. People are just a means to your end. True relationships can only exist between two people willing to connect across their differences. And in an I-thou relationship, God fills that space. Barber argued that the I-thou relationship between people is an intimate reflection of the I-thou relationship we have with God. The two are connected. Can you see the connection the Pharisees and the Sadducees missed? As an emotionally healthy adult, the relationship with God overflows through your other relationships, even through your nemesis, your Tim. And if there is a problem horizontally, say between me and you, the problem starts vertically. You can't have a problem with Tim without also having a problem with God. If you can't figure out how to love Tim as a thou, you haven't figured out how to love God that way either. And loving Tim as a thou is independent of whether or not Tim ever loves me back the same way. We don't get to blame our problem on Tim. Okay, now I know most of you at some level. We don't have any evil people at Dayspring. We might have some stubborn people, but no evil people. No one has walked out of the room in anger today so far. Online, you're still watching. I guess some people might have tuned out online, but that's on them. The rest of us want to learn how to have healthy I-thou relationships. We want to have emotionally healthy adult relationships. So what are some steps you can take? One of the churchy words we don't use much around Dayspring is the word incarnational. Incarnational. It's a 5-syllable word, and I get a bonus every time I use them, so every now and then. Most often the word is used with respect to the incarnation of Christ, which simply means that Jesus met us on our terms. He didn't stay up in heaven expecting us to make it there on our own. He entered our world. He added humanity to his divinity, and he met us for our forgiveness, healing, and restoration. He entered our world. If we want to have emotionally healthy adult relationships, we have to learn how to do the same. We need to live incarnational lives. Lives where we enter another person's world. Not just physically, although that's certainly a part of it, but you can physically be in someone's world without emotionally entering their world. There are 3 characteristics of incarnation. They are all distinct, but need to happen simultaneously. So whether you want to incarnate with your spouse, your kids, your neighbor, your coworker, the friend, the jerk you disagree with, whoever, even God, all three dynamics need to come together for incarnation to happen. First, we must learn to enter another's world. We must learn to enter another's world. Annie Dillard tells about some British explorers in their search for the North Pole in the 1800s. They knew it would be a 2 to 3 year journey, and yet each sailing vessel carried only a 12-day supply of coal. Instead of bringing more coal, each ship made room for a 1,200-volume library, a hand organ playing 50 tunes, china place settings for officers and men, cut glass wine goblets and sterling silver flatware. They carried no special clothing for the Arctic except the uniforms of the Queen's Navy. When the Eskimos came across their frozen remains, the men were all dressed up, pulling a lifeboat full of sterling silver and chocolate. Talk about unprepared for reality. But our reality is that we come to relationships just as unprepared. We need some skills. We need listening. We are almost universally bad at listening. Listening doesn't come naturally to anyone. If we've been in church for long, we've heard sermons about being slow to speak and quick to listen, but we get it backwards time and time again. Statistically, people only hear 50% of what you are saying because they're thinking about what they're going to say in response. They're listening to respond, not listening to understand. That means they've already finished your thoughts, or it doesn't matter what your thoughts are in the first place. You're going to hear what they want to say, whether you like it or not. In fact, another brain study shows that our brains light up more when we are talking than when we are listening, meaning that we like to talk more than we like to listen. David Augsburger has summed this up well. Being heard is so close to being loved that for the average person, they are almost indistinguishable. Now, I know you think this doesn't apply to you. You just know that you are a good listener. No, you're not. Because 46% of you aren't even present in the conversation. Your brain is multitasking about completely different things. Dinner, picking up the kids, work deadlines, the TV lineup. If you're going to listen, you need to be fully present in the conversation, practicing the presence of people. Jesus was fully present in every conversation he had. Matthew, Nathanael, the prostitute, Nicodemus, a blind man, the Samaritan woman, just to name a few. When the rich young ruler came to him, Jesus looked at him and loved him. He listened. He was fully present, never rushed, never distracted. People who can enter into another person's world are available and present. 2 weeks ago, John quoted theologian. He was a smart man. He also said this: to care means, first of all, to be present to each other. From experience, you know that those who care for you become present to you. When they listen to you. When they speak to you. Their presence is a healing presence because they accept you on your terms and they encourage you to take your own life seriously. I used to have a mentor who would ask thought-provoking questions, which is a skill I believe every Christ follower should learn. I would bumble around with an answer that usually sounded like I was speaking gibberish. When I was done, he would repeat back to me what I said, only better. He made it sound like I was a genius. He was the genius because he listened. He entered my world. That's the first characteristic of incarnational relationship being. The second is learning to hold on to yourself. I'm a fixer. When someone presents me with a problem, I immediately jump to the fix. The problem is, I'm not always being asked to fix something. In fact, that's true most of the time. Lots of things aren't mine to fix. And even if I have the ability to fix something, sometimes I can get ahead of God and fix something that He wants the person to fix themselves. Remember those limits we've already talked about in this series? I have to accept those limits. Now, here's another limit we have a hard time accepting. Your problems are your problems. Your problems are not my problems, most of the time. Has someone ever vented their frustration with you, and then you find yourself mad at the same person they are because of what that person did to your friend, not you? That's losing yourself. It ain't your fight. We also lose ourselves when we don't assert our preferences or point of view. We lose ourselves when we disagree with someone else's conclusion about our own lives, but we do what they want anyway. Or we don't speak truth because we're afraid of hurting their feelings or because they might get mad at us. I've had young adults tell me that their parents are still parenting them like they lived at home, trying to force their way of doing things on their adult kids. Hold on to your own life. You know, one way this shows up in churches? Pastor, did you know that other church does this thing that was really successful? You should do that here. Not all churches are the same. What works at one might not work at another. And pastors lose themselves all the time trying to please their congregations like this. Not your pastors, by the way. We don't respond to you shoulds. We explore we coulds. Hold on to yourself. The third characteristic of incarnational living is learning to hang between two worlds. When Jesus was incarnate here on earth, He was still fully God, in communion with His Father, and at the same time, He was fully human, experiencing suffering and death. He hung between both worlds. It would have been easier to just stay in heaven. It wasn't safe for Him to enter this world. In doing so, He invited sorrow and pain into His life. He was misunderstood, unappreciated. It was messy. When we choose to incarnate, we hang between our world and the world of another person. It takes time and sacrifice. It is almost always a disruption to our world. Sometimes God calls us to be the sandpaper in someone else's life, used to sand down their rough edges. That's never fun for the sander or the sandy. Sometimes it's the other way around, or both. There's risk. It is often messy. But Jesus' choice to hang between both worlds brought us great life. So will our choice do the same. We will bear much fruit in our own lives and in the lives of others. When we go outside of ourselves and live briefly in the world of another person, we will never return to our lives the same. God changes us to be more like Jesus through the process. We are transformed even as He transforms the other person. We learn that being the person He calls us to be is far more important than doing. This is what it means to love like Jesus, to practice the presence of people. We incarnate. Now, as we close, let's jump back to your Tim once more. You probably don't need to start this process with your Tim. But maybe the kind of love we've been talking about could be your long-term target for your Tim, something to work toward. Practice on others until you can figure out how to love Tim. Everyone else then will be a piece of cake. If we can't make our faith work with Tim, our faith doesn't really work. We only get partial credit for loving the people we easily love. It's not until we can love those other people that our faith really has traction in our lives. So practice. That's what I've done. I don't hate Tim anymore. I can't say that I love him yet the way Jesus would, but I don't want him to burn in hell anymore either. I'll keep at it. I want to be an emotional adult after all. I don't want anything to get in the way of me becoming more like Jesus, not even Tim. How about you? Let's pray. Father, we aren't so great at loving the way Jesus calls us to love. We're not so great at incarnating into other people's lives. We're pretty good about holding grudges and distancing ourselves and feeling a little self-righteous. Sadly, those aren't the things that you call us to. Those aren't the things that make us emotional adults. Give us the desire first to become an emotional adult with you, and let that overflow into every other relationship that we have. May we love our Tims like Jesus does. And again, everything will be a piece of cake if we can figure that one out. Show us the way, Father. We can't get there on our own. If we're honest about it, we know that's true. But trying on our own hasn't really moved us the way that you call us to move. So show us the way. Even today, Father, may we practice the presence of people. In Jesus' precious name, amen.
It's been our honor to have you join us in worship today. Whether you are a regular Dayspring attender or just joined us for the first time, we'd love to walk with you on your spiritual journey. Feel free to drop us an email if you have questions or want more information. If you'd like to partner with Dayspring financially, we have 3 easy ways for you to give. We don't take any financial gift for granted. Every penny is used to share the truth of Jesus Christ, not only in Salem and Kaiser, but around the world. Please see the online giving section of our website, text GIVE to the number on your screen, or mail one of those old-fashioned checks to us. Make sure to subscribe, share, and like our live stream wherever you watch it. Until next week, may the grace of God bless every aspect of your life.